What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Today, in the sequel to yesterday's video, we're going to talk about some Pokemon that actually got better over time in SV DOU. And to be honest, this video might be like a fair bit shorter than the last one because I feel like there's actually kind of like less instances of Pokemon that like definitively like got a lot better over time. But I still found it to be interesting to kind of highlight like the very major like innovations that have occurred in like the history of SV, um, which you know there's many ways like innovation in Pokemon occurs, right? But perhaps the most easy to like spot is like the Pokemon rather than like the archetypes, right? Like a Pokemon that's like doesn't see a whole lot of play suddenly has like a lot more play, and vice versa. And we already talked about the vice versa. So today we're going to be talking about Pokemon that were like perceived as then got better or perceived as pretty good and like became great. So I guess similar to the last video, we'll talk about Pokemon that like got like slightly better overall, like first, before we move on to like some Pokemon that were like really considered like out there before rising to like a lot more prominence in the tier. So I guess to begin with, right? Okay, to clarify, for the most part, we're gonna be talking about Pokemon that are like definitively got better, not like had like a period that where they were like very good and then like were cycled out of the metagame. Because I mean, that could be a whole video in and of itself, right? But just Pokemon that like noticeably went from A to B in a period of time. I guess like depends on what we're talking about, but I'm trying to be as objective as possible with this, although that's almost impossible in a game like Pokemon, right? So I guess to start off, we could talk about Gholdengo, which is kind of a weird case because this Pokemon has always been good. Um, but there's definitely like probably found itself in like maybe the best position of the generation like towards the end. And it's not really a case of like this Pokemon was like, oh, no one knew this was good. Everyone always knew this Pokemon was good. Um, but rather the conditions around the tier have probably made it better over time. And that's probably possibly in part for several factors. So first of all, like early on in the tier's history, like while Gholdengo everyone knew was like had potential to be a very good Pokemon, it was kind of like, there are several things that were very good at the time that were quite good into it, notably these two guys, which basically full walled it, and then also Flutter, which general that's crazy. Generally made the tier much more offensive and a lot better at dealing with like plot Gholdengo, which is generally its best set, although we've seen other sets in the past. And so the way Gholdengo was used kind of changed a little bit over time. We saw a lot more Scarf in the past, especially when the Flutter was legal. But with Flutter removed, over time it got better. People didn't have to rely on like um, using like the Scarf to get over Flutter anymore. They could branch out to other sets, and over time, like obviously it kind of coalesced around like Plot and Specs being the two main sets, which was kind of always the case, but it had like a lot more room to do it, and like a couple other things, right? Like something like Roaring Moon being good, definitely. Like it seems like it would be bad for Gholdengo, but it's actually not that bad because this is just excellent speed control. I think Gold pairs a lot better with Roaring Moon as opposed to Torn because Moon can like provide like physical damage reduction for Gold at the same time, knock off Assault Vest, things like that. So generally, Roaring Moon's Rise is pretty good for Gold as well. And the tier, Broken Stuff getting banned, Arch getting banned, has all made Gholdengo better over time. So just like a slight rise. I mean, it was just like always like at least a tier 3 Pokemon, most of the time tier 2, except like really early on when like the things that were like good were just like really, really good into it. Kind of an interesting story with Gholdengo. Let's see, what else can we talk about? Had like smaller shifts in viability. Let's see. Oh yeah, I had a list. That's right. Yeah, I guess another one we could talk about would be Kyurem. Kyurem's another Pokemon like this was like it's never like not everyone like it was never the case that people thought this Pokemon was bad, but it's more of like the way it used kind of changed over time, and people eventually started using stuff like Kyurem without snow, which was not really a thing when it was first in the game, released in the game in like the second DLC. That was a development that only like started to take place last year. Um, Spearheaded by several people, most notably C. And well, it's just kind of an interesting an interesting concept, right? Because like in the past, people would use like, well, just use it as a snow Pokemon, blah blah blah. But eventually, people realize, like Glaciate and like Draco Meteor, those are good moves. Earth Power as well. So definitely a Pokemon that like kind of saw like a new way it was used, and that definitely increased its usage. And similar to Gholdengo, I mean, it's not like people thought this Pokemon was bad, but it eventually started seeing more play before it reached today, where it's like, it's in a pretty good spot. It's not like, I think people like objectively like prepare for it better now than in the past, but it still is like, it saw its increase in usage, and now it's like around like probably the correct amount. It's funny, I mean, like Kyurem getting better outside of snow actually has probably made snow worse because it kind of just, with the Assault Vest and so much Spadef, it kind of just sits on snow. Let's see, okay. I guess like a couple other things that can be talked about is like and also things people like that saw play but were never like super common. I'd say Moltres over time is like seemed like a little bit more play. It's just like a win condition as the tier like got bulkier, slowed down, and like it started to get the ability to just like get nasty plots off more regularly in games, which wasn't always the case, especially with like stuff like Flutter or Archlegal. Just kind of normal, like slight increase in usage. Other things, let's see. None of these Pokemon are really like the main object of this video, but they're still worth mentioning anyways because, there were definitive increases in viability. Sinistcha, kind of same thing, although I'd say Sinistcha has kind of had like a very interesting, I guess like people like kind of like, this Pokemon was very good when Arcalon was legal, and then when Arcalon got banned, kind of like fell off for a little bit. But eventually people realized that it was like still very, very good. It has an incredible defensive typing at beating Ursaluna, which is actually like Pokemon that's very, very difficult to like comfortably take hits from, even when they resist. And Sinistcha is the best Pokemon in the game under Ursaluna, so that's kind of something that it does pretty well. So it's definitely seen like kind of a resurgence in usage, which is interesting. But again, not a Pokemon people ever thought was bad. So it's not like super crazy. Other things, like the development of like Gouging Fire and Tinglu stuff. Especially Gouging Fire, like a few months into like DLC2, people really started like using it more. People like Frixel. And I mean, it's kind of a different case. I mean, people just like hadn't like fully explored the mod. It hadn't been legal that long. Tinglu is a little bit more interesting case where people have like more recently started like putting grassy seed on it, which has made the Pokemon a lot better and a lot less passive, clicking stuff like Body Press, which actually does respectable damage coming off of this high like defense stat, and it doesn't really take a whole lot of damage. Some people even run like Terra Fighting on it, and so that's been like a definitive like increase in the mon's usage from that, probably. It just like increased its versatility a lot. Okay. I guess we can now start getting into the things that like really came out of nowhere. I guess to start off, we can talk about Okidogi, which is like Pokemon was like almost very rarely seen. I think it was like tier 5 on the VR for like most of the gen. And if you look at it now, it now sits in tier 2, which is kind of crazy. What happened? So I mean, this Pokemon is like, you look at it, it's like, okay, it's like pretty bulky. It has an ability that nullifies Intimidate, can't be switched out. It's pretty interesting. And I think people like over time just realize this Pokemon actually is like quite good. Like it beats Incineroar really hard, as opposed to like another fighting type like Iron Hands, which we actually discussed in the last video. And Okidogi is kind of like the anti-Iron Hands. It got better as Iron Hands got worse. And it's better into Incineroar because of Guard Dog. And it can also has like Bulk Up, which is really strong since it can't be intimidated, right? So things like that, and then the Assault Vest set also is pretty good. I think with Dogi, it's another like beneficiary of the team, the tier becoming like a little bit less offensive, more space for it to click buttons. But I feel like that really doesn't tell the full story. I think people like this Pokemon was probably good all along, but people, sometimes it takes a while to discover Pokemon that like are like maybe a little bit unconventional, especially like Pokemon that like don't really like have never really seen a whole lot of usage in VDC, which is kind of the case with Okidogi. I think this Pokemon like is kind of just in Urshifu jail, but in a format without a Urshifu, you look at this Pokemon and you're like, wait, this Pokemon's like actually really good when there's not another fighting type that ignores Intimidate. it beats Incineroar. And I think, like, yeah, it just has, like, a lot of set versatility, like Gunk Shot, Drain Punch. And the tier getting, like I said, like, generally bulky over time. It's also an incredible Pokemon at dealing with Tinglu with the combination of, like, Leftovers bulk up, right? Because it can't be phased out. Boosts its defense. It's really good in these physical offense teams. I was using it for that for, like, a really long time. I was actually one of the, like, early adopters of this Pokemon, even, like, shortly after it was released. But eventually, like, I kind of, like, I dropped off on Pokemon, and eventually, like, it came back because other people were using it, and I think that's really cool. It's a pretty neat Pokemon, and, like, definitely one that, like, saw, like, a huge increase in play during 2025. One of the major developments of that year. It's interesting, yeah. It definitely, like, it's a very, very good punish of, like, physical offense, and then the Assault Vest set is just generally good into, like, the Ogre Ponds, just being able to Oko them with Gunk Shot and stuff, so pretty versatile Pokemon. Not too surprising in hindsight, but this was not a Pokemon that people thought was good for very long, and it's seen a very huge increase in usage. I don't think people ever thought, like, Okidogi was, like, completely irredeemable or anything, but it was definitely, like, not that common. I think if it was on the VR, it was in, like, tier 5. So, very, very solid Pokemon. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about, let's talk about Roaring Moon. So Roaring Moon is, like, a Pokemon that's been around since, like, the very beginning of the generation. And, like, in the beginning, it was really funny. It didn't even have knockoff. It was just clicking Crunch and Breaking Swipe and Tail. And even then, like, it was really not that bad speed control, but the problem was it was slower than Bundle, which was a lot better at the time. And people probably weren't really running as bulky sets on it as they do now. But eventually, like, people started catching on. And, like, there were always a few believers in Roaring Moon, myself included. But it was never, like, a super popular Pokemon, again, until, like, last year, when people realized, wait, this is, like, really incredible Pokemon that's supporting, like, other top threats in the tier, and also, like, matches up pretty decently into them. Like, Knockoff is just good value into the tier, Breaking Swipe is good value into the tier, things like that. Tailwind is great. The tier kind of got, this is, like, one of the main reasons the tier got bulkier, but it also benefited out of it, like, not, like, playing against Chen Pao every game, and people getting better at playing into, like, stuff like Chen Pao, realizing how they can play around it. Realizing that those Pokemon that match up well into Roaring Moon don't actually, like, debilitate Roaring Moon completely. And it just, like I said, it pairs very, very well with, like, other great Pokemon in the tier. Like, this is, like, a very common form of Pokemon, you know, and it's like, yeah, you have your offensive Mon, your Redirector, your like, general special attacker, your setup swooper, like, you just get so many things out of, like, pairing it with other top Pokemon. And so this is a Pokemon that definitely, like, was overlooked for a very long time. And as the tier, like, got better developed, people, like, it got better as people realized how to play the tier better, I think is the best way to put it, because it's not like, at least since DLC 2, I don't really think a whole lot of things, like, meaningfully changed for Roaring Moon. Like, I guess it was, like, pretty terrible under Arcalodon, but it always wanted to be paired with Landorus anyway. I think it definitely was just a case of, you know, people realized what they were actually supposed to be doing with the Pokemon, and, like, running bulk on it, and then, ironically, I think as Roaring Moon gets better, like, as it saw more play, more people were like, wait, this Pokemon's pretty good. It actually, like, plays pretty well into itself. It gives you, like, a lot of options. So, you know, interesting Pokemon there. Alright, let's move on to some Pokemon that were truly, like, out of left field in terms of, like, what they did in the tier. So the first one is Bronzong. And Bronzong is, like, an interesting case, right? Like, it's definitely, like, a solid Pokemon, but it's not, like, a Mon that's, like, historically used a whole lot in DOU. It's besides, like, Gen 4, where it's, like, you know, it's early Gen, and it's, like, pretty good. And then Gen 7, where it has Hypnosis, Seed, Trick Room. And it doesn't have any of those, like, you know, the power level's a lot higher. It doesn't have Seed, Trick Room in Gen 9. Doesn't see any play in any of the other gens, really. But then you look at the Pokemon, it's like, it's pretty good. Wait, it actually, like, you know, it actually full walls Landorus, you know, which, you know, it's only, like, obviously, like, it does that, and everyone knows it does that. But then, you know, it's difference between, like, wait, it full walls Landorus, and wait, it walls, like, the best offensive Mon in the tier. And so, it also walls, like, Chen Pao and stuff like that under the right conditions. And it has Terra, it can click Iron Defense Body Press. It's a really threatening setup sweeper if your team's unprepared for it. And it's really only, like, Gholdengo and, like, Amoonguss that have, like, incredible matchups into it in the tier. Like, those are, like, I mean, those Pokemon are still quite good at dealing with Bronzong, but then you're like, wait, it pairs, like, super well versus Luna. And so this is, like, really an archetype that really developed, like, in the last year. And now it's like a staple of the format. Like it's on a sample team now, and this was a Pokemon that wasn't even like ranked, and it's probably like still ranked a little bit too low on this VR. Uh, it's in tier 4, which is like fair, but it could easily be tier 3. It's one of the best trick room setters in the format. It has actually like surprisingly like impressive set variety. Like I've run Zen Headbutt before to beat Okidogi, which could be annoying for it. Obviously, Trick Room is great. And it just really has a great typing. And, you know, the people who used it, most notably Mike, had like a lot of success with it, and it really put it on the map. So this was definitely like one of the biggest like increases in viability in the course of the generation. And it's really like this, the most interesting thing about this Pokemon is this poor move slot, like all the different things you can slot on there. Stealth Rock, Psychic Noise, Ice Spinner, particular like grassy terrain for Ursaluna. And it's really just a case of it has great matchups with the top threats, and it pairs really well with like the most dangerous Pokemon in the tier, which is Ursaluna under Trick Room. This Pokemon is completely threatening, and it's always been threatening, but the partnership with Bronzong has made it even better. And it's really like what drives Bronzong, because there's no like better Pokemon at dealing with Gholdengo than Ursaluna, probably, other than like Landorus. But Ursaluna is pretty dang annoying, especially because, you know, you Terra and then it whacks you with Facade and kills you anyway. So definitely like a mon that was overlooked, and you know, it actually had like really great like metagame applications, kind of similar to like we were talking about with Gholdengo, like Arcalodon getting banned. You know, wait, I can have other steel types on my teams now. Like, yeah, it's a really great Pokemon that no one really like thought of for a long time. So I think like one of the most like clearest examples I can think of a Pokemon that like coming from like zero viability to being like one of the most like common Pokemon you'll place in the tier. I mean, not like that common. Like it's still like a Trick Room Pokemon. Like you have to commit to running it, but like this is like a serious metagame threat that like every team needs to have a game plan into, and that's like kind of something that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago, and I think that's really neat. All right, so the last Pokemon we're going to talk about today is actually Espathra, not Espeon, Espathra, the Pokemon that was saw almost no play for like 3 years and then got banned. So what happened? And so this is a really interesting Pokemon that is also not interesting at the same time. It's just Calm Mind Baton Pass, right? But, you know, Baton Pass is usually not that good in DOU, but what happened in SV? Well, you know, like I said a lot in this video, like the tier, like as people get better at playing the tier and like realizing how to like play into offensive threats, tiers tend to get more like bulky as they progress, and that really made Espathra really strong. Because the thing in SV is people got a lot better at playing around the physical attackers and like covering for them, playing into them. The thing is, Espathra was really good at like punishing very like special attack heavy teams like Snow. And just like getting like combines before they could attack and becoming almost unkillable, and then Baton passing it off when its HP got low. And this was a Pokemon that like I'd seen some play Baton Pass into like Arcalodon, but it was always kind of seen as like a gimmick. But eventually people realized like, yes, it's a gimmick, but it also is like quite good at doing what it does. You know, and it's an incredibly annoying Pokemon, and it's like, you know, probably the sharpest increase in viability that we've seen in this generation in terms of like it actually got the Pokemon banned. I mean, it's not like Espathra was like on every team or whatever. I mean, it was still like not that common in usage, but it was something that was like so oppressively broken in like the right matchups that it actually ended up getting banned. And so maybe like I think it's fair to consider it like the premier example of a Pokemon whose viability shifted in this year, because it really like, you know, this is something that all happened in like the last 10 months. People started using Espathra again. People were like, wait, we don't like playing against this. This is like really cringe. You know, there's plenty of redirection options in SV, and that makes it even stronger as well. And like fake out, just like so many options to like enable it to set up. It's not like there weren't things that like didn't beat it, but you know, once people started running it more, it was like clear that it was like not like healthy for the tier. So that's another, you know, interesting thing that can happen in Pokemon. You know, like Pokemon you don't even like consider as serious metagame threats, they can become broken. You know, like or like uncompetitive and like really like damage the health of a tier. Like if they get properly developed, and it can happen really fast sometimes. So that's you know, something to keep in mind with when you're playing Pokemon. You know, like even now, like SV is a tier that, you know, people think is like kind of solved or whatever. It's really not. There's so many things to do and like to explore, and you know, Who knows? Maybe there's like a Pokemon out there that like cleanly beats all four of these Pokemon, you know, that hasn't been used, um, and like matches up really well into the metagame. And so, you know, metagame development in Pokemon is really interesting. So I hope these last two videos have been kind of interesting at like illustrating like what has changed in SV over time. So hope you enjoyed watching this one and the last one. And you know, comment down below if you have any questions about SV DOU you want me to answer in a video. And we'll see you next time.